Now, faith healing is pretty much healing purportedly through spiritual means. People who believe in faith healing believe that through prayer and rituals, God will heal disease and disability. Hey, awesome. Unfortunately, it's been shown that many times this does not work. The most recent case being the case of Catherine and Herbert Scheibel, who have been sentenced to 3.5 to 7 years in prison for not taking their 8-month-old son to the hospital when he exhibited signs of pneumonia. The son, of course, later died. Now, the couple had already been on probation for the death of their 2-year-old son, Kent, from bacterial pneumonia. Now, instead of seeking medical care, this couple decided to practice faith healing. Herbert Scheibel told police that, quote, "We believe in divine healing, that Jesus shed blood for our healing, and that he died on the cross to break the devil's power." His wife, Catherine, told the judge during the hearing, "My religious beliefs are that you should pray and not have to use medicine, but because it is against the law, whatever sentence you give me, I will accept." Now, they were charged, of course, with third-degree murder, and like I mentioned before, they were sentenced to 3.5 to 7 years in prison for this. Now, as far as faith healing goes, faith healing kills about 12 children per year. That's not a lot when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, but since they're from highly treatable issues or problems, it becomes an issue where the state tends to want to get involved, since those deaths are pretty needless. Legislatures in Idaho are trying to prevent more cases like the Scheibels from happening, and they tried to pass a law proposed by John Gannon. Now, Idaho is the home of the followers of the Christ Church. The followers of Christ strictly rely on faith healing alone. No medical care whatsoever, just faith healing. A practice that has led to the deaths of many children from some easily treatable causes. For example, 15-year-old Arian Jane Grandin. She got food poisoning, vomited for 3 days straight, so much so that her esophagus ruptured and she died from cardiac arrest. Garrett Dean Eels died of pneumonia at just 6 days old. Cooper Shippey died of complications from type 1 diabetes. He was almost 2 years old. Now, these kids are buried in Peaceful Valley Cemetery outside Caldwell, and this is in Idaho. The cemetery is where the followers of Christ bury their dead. 25% of all the headstones in this cemetery belong to children of this church. 144 out of the 553 headstones belong to children, and a lot of those have been filled up within the past few years. Because of this, Gannon has promoted changes to Idaho's child injury laws to lift some of the exemptions for faith healing in instances when a child needs medical care or could die. Some of these laws in Idaho make it impossible for prosecutors to go after those that withhold medical treatment for children if they claim religious exemptions or objections. Under Chapter 15 of Idaho's Crimes and Punishment Statutes, it states that any person who willfully causes or permits a child to be placed in a situation that its person or health is endangered could spend 10 years in prison, but also says prayer or spiritual means alone shall not, for that reason alone, be construed to have violated the duty of care to the child. Chapter 16, under juvenile proceedings, says that the court may step in and authorize medical care if the parents won't, and doctor petitions for it, but it also states that the court must take into consideration any treatment given the child by prayer through spiritual means alone. So prosecutors can't even charge people with neglect in some of these cases where children die due to the parents withholding care. So what happened when Gannon decided to bring this to a vote? The Republican Party in Idaho shut it down. House Speaker Scott Bedke wouldn't even bring this up for a debate, and he declined to say why. Other Republicans are a little bit more vocal on this topic, arguing that Gannon's bill would infringe upon these people's religious liberty. Quote, "This is about religious beliefs. The belief God is in charge of whether they live and God is in charge of whether they die. This is about where they go for eternity," said one of the Republicans that voted to keep this from being debated. while Gannon is on the record saying, quote, medical treatment for physical harm to a child should supersede every other consideration, even the religious beliefs of the parents. Now, I want to go to the panel and get your guys' thoughts on this. What do you think?
I want to jump in first here if I could.
Have at it.
Yeah, so I'm really glad Dan's with us tonight, and I'm not the only religious person. Yeah, so I want to say like a couple things here, man. Like, this is a crazy situation. One, I want to say that I completely and totally agree, not only religiously but constitutionally, that the religious beliefs of the parents don't get to supersede the well-being of the child. And the reason I point that out is the exact same position that these crazy right-wing politicians, who are arguing against Sharia law take. Like they're arguing against a religious belief system. One, I don't buy into this narrative that Muslims are out to kill Americans, but that's part of what they're propagating. And so, if they truly believe this argument they're making, then they should be out there saying, hey, you know what? Muslims are out to kill Americans, but that's their religious belief, so they should get to do that. We don't believe that. That's crazy. When you're killing innocent people, the fact that you're killing innocent people supersedes your religious belief. And so that false narrative against Muslims that they have propagated applies here. If you're killing innocent people, then that supersedes your religious beliefs. So you don't get to kill your children because you believe in quote-unquote faith healing. Now, full disclosure, I say that as a person who grew up in an environment where quote-unquote faith healing meant not only did you pray, for God to heal people, but you also prayed for the doctors to have wisdom. And to have a steady hand if there was surgery, yada yada yada. Like, where you recognize that God seems to work through material, or at least the Christian God. I can't speak for other faiths, but it seems to work through the natural order of the world. And if that means a doctor doing a decent job at what doctors are supposed to do, then you prayed for the doctor to do a decent job. That to me does not seem like an unchristian thing to pray. But if you believe that's an unchristian thing to pray, well, then don't pray that. But you don't get to hold your kids from that, especially when it comes to immunizations or something else that like, not only are you putting your children at risk because of your crazy beliefs, but you're putting other people's children at risk because of a communicable disease for your crazy beliefs. That's not a matter of First Amendment rights. That's a matter of you putting other innocent human beings in danger for your unprovable beliefs, which is the exact same thing as the supposed narrative of Muslims killing people because of their religious beliefs. Like, if you're going to argue you get to kill innocent people, then Muslims, even though, again, I don't agree with that narrative, but if you're going to say that's a true narrative, then whatever, they're getting a First Amendment right. If you're going to say Christians get that narrative, then Muslims should get that narrative. Truth be told, I don't think anyone should get that narrative. I think in the Constitution, whenever you're putting innocent people who don't agree with those religious beliefs at risk, that trumps your religious narrative. So yeah, no one's saying you can't pray for God to heal your kids. They're just saying if you have a communicable disease and there's a way to stop that communicable disease, stop it. Pray while you're stopping it, but stop it. That's not a violation of your religious freedom. And again, I say that as a religious person. Thankfully tonight, like I say, I'm not the only religious person here, so let's let Dan chime in and see what he has to say.
Yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, well, I have three specific perspectives that I see this from. From a professional standpoint, I sit on the board of CASA in Arkansas, which is court-appointed special advocates for children who are abused and placed in the foster care system. So,
and hey, Dan, my wife is a CASA advocate, so bravo, brother.
I am. Oh, yeah, CASA rocks. So from that perspective, absolutely, it's our responsibility, as a community to stop children from being put in any kind of danger there, especially when it's when they are kind of in danger against themselves, and people are allowing sicknesses that you said are very easily treatable and curable to fester in children and expect God to take it out. That's not how it works. I always talk about the concept of meeting God halfway, using the example from the children's book Where the Red Fern Grows. Billy wanted the 2 dogs in Where the Red Fern Grows, and somebody told him if he wanted those dogs, he was going to have to meet God halfway. And so he prayed for the dogs, but then he went out and chopped wood and did other kinds of odd jobs till he had the $10 to get the dogs. So God does his part, but then you got to do the rest. And so, expecting, faith without works is dead, really, as a Christian person. And so if you are praying and praying and praying for things, but not taking into account that there is a system in place to fix it, and that may be the answer that you're looking for, but because you're so blinded by, it's got to be faith, it's got to be faith, it's got to be faith, you miss it. Then children are dying needlessly, and from a religious perspective. Lastly, from the law, like I said, I think too it just kind of goes back almost hand in hand that it is the state's responsibility through its current auspices and DHS or DCFS, whatever the system is there, or whatever it's called, to make sure that those children are protected and have a voice that is louder and more clear and more distinct than other voices that may come from a religious group or from a non-religious group or from anything else that would say anything that would be portrayed as a child not having what they need to survive or to even have a chance to survive. I mean, we've got 6-day-old kids dying from sicknesses that they shouldn't even have, and if they do, they never should have left the hospital where they were born. When those things happen, it makes other Christians look bad, and because we're not all like that. It's just not a fair representation of what the average Christian on the street may believe about sickness, God's role, and the human's role, and how to bring it to whatever the desired end is.
Yeah. We're going to go to Sean next, but first I kind of want to point out that assuming that they issue all medical pretty much all medicine or something like that, or at least medical treatment, it's safe to assume that they're not born in a hospital. So, I mean, it's safe to assume that since they shut down any kind of healing or anything like that, that they would mostly have home births. But Sean, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, Jeff. Let me jump in before Sean. And just Jeff, Dan and I both kind of argued from a faith perspective. Let me keep a string of consistency going up here where, like when it comes to the evolution thing, where I pointed out, like, even from a person of faith perspective, that's a bad position to hold. The same is true here. Like again, I can't speak for other faiths, but from Christianity, in the New Testament, you have the Apostle Paul telling St. Timothy to take the old, or at least the first century equivalent of medicine. Take a little wine for your stomach. Don't drink just water. So clearly, like if you're going to try to say like you can't go to a doctor and seek treatment, not only is that a dumb progressive position, not only does that ignore the scientific method, it's a bad Christian position, because Christianity clearly has a precedent established that medicine is okay. But anyway, I'll let Sean jump in here now. I just wanted to say.
Yeah, so I got 3 ridiculous points and then my serious point. So my first one is Dan says he's on the board of CASA. Jordan says his wife is a CASA advocate, and Dan, you neglected the opportunity to say, well, me CASA es su CASA. Well, whatever, I'll let that one slide. Also, the Red Fern Grows taught me how to capture raccoons, so greatly appreciate that. Now, to get more into this, the main story that I was thinking of was the woman who both of her kids died of bacterial pneumonia, and like, forget about like not learning your lesson on taking your kid to the doctor once they got the pneumonia, but like you could at least close the window in your kid's room the second time. after the first one died. Like, I mean, that's pretty obvious. But like, obviously, these faith healers are ridiculous. And to get into more serious, to be more serious, it's you have a lot of range as a parent over your child, but like your child is also a human and they have their own rights, and like your range is you could decide what kind of food they eat, what kind of education they get. Like you have a wide range. Like sometimes within reason, what kind of treatments that they can get. But you can't like willfully put your child in danger. It's not even neglect really, because it's not like they didn't even notice their kid was sick. It's they knew they were sick. They knew they needed help, but they were like, not really interested in that help. And it's totally ridiculous. And I actually agree with Jordan that like why would Christianity be against medicine? That makes no sense. Like the oldest medicines were from the earth, and there's that passage in the Bible that says like something. I don't know it exactly, but it basically says like the things from the earth are there for you are gifts to you from God. So like that's where we make medicine from. Like I don't know why that's like such a bad thing for this like weird Christian sect. But yeah, obviously this is like willful abuse, and I don't want to use the word neglect because again they know that their kids are sick and they're letting them die. And it's just wrong. And they have a cemetery where a quarter of the people in the cemetery are children, like young children, and it's not a cemetery from like 1940. Like it's a modern day cemetery where we shouldn't have so many children dead and buried there. It makes no sense. And like when your kid's sick, take them to a hospital, or at least get them some freaking Tylenol, like some kind of medicine.
Yeah, let me jump in too, and just to continue to gang up on these faith healers, let me build on what Sean's saying here. Like, all right, so you want to argue it's a constitutional right, it's a religious right, yada yada yada. I'm going to disagree with that all day. I think that's crazy.
Like a lot of these Republicans are.
Sure. But where this really becomes totally crazy, again, and it goes to the science of it. All right, so I think even if what I'm about to say wasn't true, it's wrong to put your children in danger. I don't think that's a constitutional right, and I certainly don't think that is something that you have a moral, that it's morally okay. But let me go ahead and just further reinforce that to what we call herd mentality or herd immunization. Not only are you putting your children in danger, which I guess you could argue is a constitutional right, but I think you're wrong. Whenever it comes, that there are, in all the anti-vaccination propaganda and stuff like that, there are legitimately out there a few people who can't get those vaccinations, whether it's because of allergies, whatever. And so the way herd vaccination works is 98% of people are vaccinated. We take care of those people who can't get vaccinated because the disease, it's so rare. So whenever faith healers or anti-vaxxers, which if I can reference a clip from a few weeks ago about GMOs being liberal global warming, anti-vaxxers are right up there. There's a lot of liberal anti-vaccination people.
Well, you're kind of getting ahead.
Scientific. Yeah.
You're kind of getting ahead of the segments here.
I'm so sorry. I didn't.
The anti-vax story. So
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Well, anyway.
Don't give away the farm.
Sorry. Anyway, my point is, whenever you do that, there is a quantifiable number. I guess it's around 95, 96%. I wish we had a better science person on the show than me. To confirm that. But anyway, there's a quantifiable number where herd vaccination breaks down. So not only are you threatening the lives of your own children, which I guess maybe you can argue is your constitutional right, I'll disagree with you, you're also threatening the lives of everyone else's kid, which is undeniably not your constitutional right.
Yeah.
Get your kids vaccinated. Take care of people. Period.
Well, this next segment's going to be really easy for me since I already heard Jordan's argument for the next segment. But this story is about like kids that are already sick. To me, a vaccine is a preventative measure, right? Like it's not like this is about kids that are obviously sick. Like they let kids die from diabetes and and food poisoning, which is terrible, and like all these things. So this is like if your kid is already obviously ill, then you don't treat them. Like the vaccines is a different like case to me, and it's a different story and a different segment.
Look, the food poisoning one, man. That's, I mean, 15 years old, right? Food poisoning, easily treatable, but yet 3 days of just, I mean, throwing up until you die. Imagine the horrible pain that these parents put this girl through. All because, don't worry, Jesus will take care of it.
And by the way, the most common thing that these kids die from isn't some crazy disease or anything. The most common thing that these kids end up dying from is dehydration caused by diarrhea. Like
it's like it's back in the 1800s before we had modern medical science. That's what people would die from. A lot.
All right, let me jump in here. All right, Sean. So we're clearly all in agreement that these religious extremists are wrong. All right, Sean, you're a libertarian. You don't believe in government involvement, yada, yada, yada. Who steps in and takes care of these kids if not the government?
Fascinating. We're going to have some drums?
I was muted. Well, I didn't say. First of all, I believe in a limited role for government, and like that includes police and fire and all that. And yeah, if you're like willfully abusing your kids, like you should lose your kids. Like that's just how it works. But I'm not like I'm gonna like I'll draw a distinction in the next story between the people who don't vaccinate their kids. But if your kid is actively sick and you're not taking care of them, then you should be punished and you should lose your kids if they're still alive. If they died, then you should be held responsible to the fullest extent of the law.
Okay, I think that's fair. I appreciate that.
Hey, if you enjoyed this clip, make sure to like and leave a comment below, or even share. Sharing is caring. If you want to see more TYT Nation videos, go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TYT Nation. Thank you for watching.